Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today, we have with us Pastor Noah Taylor. He pastors the Evergreen Church in Erwin, Tennessee, and many of you know him. You've heard a podcast where we talked about the Hope Initiative. You've also maybe seen videos of him talking about the terrible devastation in East Tennessee, where his church has been on the ground there working with them. So Noah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Dr. Moody, for the opportunity to talk to you again and share with you about some of the things that are going on here in East Tennessee.
Well, Noah, we know things changed in September for Erwin, didn't they? And why don't you walk our listeners through, because some of them are well aware of what happened with the hurricane, but others maybe they've kind of forgotten because the media quickly moves on to something else. But what happened a couple of weeks ago in Erwin, Tennessee?
Yeah, well, on Friday, September the 27th, it was a pretty, in the morning at least, a fairly normal Friday for us. We knew that we were going to get a lot of rain. I think we were like people in Western North Carolina that, you knew that there was going to be some rain and some potential flooding, but I just don't think really anybody had any clue to the level of flooding that we were going to get, the devastation that was going to ensue. I mean, actually, that Friday morning, me and one of the guys that works with me here at the church, Ryan, we came into the office. We drove around to some of the areas that we knew where the river was, where we knew the water would be up. We drove over some of the bridges, that don't exist anymore. And even at that time, that morning, driving around, there was some minor flooding, but nothing that, was life-threatening, nothing that was anything. And actually, we just went back to our office, and we're having a normal day here in the office. And within a couple of hours, some things happened, and the river just rose. I think it was rising 15 feet per hour. And we didn't know that, in our office. And actually the rain had kind of stopped. The weather was actually fairly good. And I started getting phone calls about the hospital. So we're just about a mile from the hospital here in Unicoi County, that they were evacuating the hospital, and it was really dramatic. And so we went back out to try to figure out, what's going on. And we have a lot of church members that work in the hospital. The head of maintenance at the hospital is a member of our church. And so we sought to drive down to the hospital. Well, you couldn't drive to the hospital, and you really couldn't drive anywhere. The river had overflowed its banks. It was 33 feet above its normal levels. It had started at that point to take out bridges, to take out homes, to take out roads. And so for 5 hours, I think there was something like 60 people that had to get on the roof of the hospital. And Black Hawk helicopters came in and began to rescue these people and take them to the high school. And so these Black Hawk helicopters were flying right over our church. We're right between the high school and the hospital. And this happened for hours and hours. The last person off the roof was a guy named Gary Peterson, who's in our church. He's one of the members of our church. He was over the evacuations at the hospital. And so a lot of people that did watch the news may have seen that. Right there, also next to the hospital, is an industrial park so all the major employers are there. Well, the flooding took out every single plant that was there. Over 300 employees. Several of those employees lost their lives in the flooding. In their attempts to evacuate, they had waited too late. And so there was a huge search and rescue effort that followed for people that were missing. Many of those people perished. And it was surreal, to be honest with you. For several weeks, every day you would wake up and just think, man, has this really happened? I mean, because so much loss. 4 families in our church lost their homes and all their property. I mean, they evacuated, but within just a few short hours, they went from everything's fine to they've lost everything they've ever owned. And of course, as you can imagine, in the mountains, nobody really has flood insurance. I mean, nobody thinks of having flood insurance here. And so, but beyond those families in our church, scores and scores of families in our community lost everything. They lost everything. And what's unique about here versus maybe a hurricane in Florida or Eastern North Carolina or something like that is the flooding. These people didn't only lose their homes, of course, were washed away. They weren't just flooded, they were washed away, but their property was washed away. So that
Mm-hmm.
they don't even have property. They've lost their homes, they've lost their property. They don't have a place to go back to build to. They had no flood insurance. And so, I mean, people, everything they'd worked for their entire lives had been lost. And then in addition to that, in our community, 300 employees, because our town's got 6,000 people. So it's small, 300 employees lost their jobs with no real prospect of them getting another job. And so just a ton of devastation, a ton of hurt. The infrastructure of our town was disrupted, bridges out, roads that were out. The interstate, many of you are familiar with I-26 that runs through Erwin. A portion of the interstate was washed out. And so, as a church, immediately we just felt the need to, be the church during that time and meet the needs of the people that were here. This is our community. God called us here. And, this is our opportunity to identify needs and be able to meet those needs. And of course, those needs are ongoing. I mean, there were needs right in the beginning, but those needs are going to continue for a long time, years. And so, we've since then and continue to try to meet the needs of people here in our community.
So, and you've been doing that. So initially people couldn't really get to you. It was that bad, as you say, bridges washed out and all that. But then all kinds of supplies. Really, the church has been ground zero for providing resources and trying to help various people in Unicoi County. Tell us a bit about what that's been like, being able to provide resources and being able to help so many people there on the ground.
Yeah, so the flood, the flood came through on Friday. I think it was really Saturday before we really understood the level of devastation. It really took 24 hours to really find out, man, this is really, really bad. It's unprecedented. They called it here the 5,000 year flood that, the chances are once in every 5,000 years, highest on record here by far. And so on Saturday, we got together with some of our leadership and just had a burden to say, we got to do something. But the truth is, we didn't know what to do. I didn't have any, in my ministry training, had no training in disaster relief. There's no real training for that and how to respond. And so we just decided we'd be sensitive to the needs and be willing to respond in whatever way that we could. And so on Sunday, that morning, the first Sunday that after this, we had one worship service. We didn't know who would show up because we didn't know who could even get to us, because a lot of our people were cut off where they live. And so that Sunday, I preached from Psalm 46 that the Lord is a very present help in trouble. Even Psalm 46 talks about, your response to the weather and the storms and the thunder, and that in the midst of that, He's our refuge. And I preached about that, and I brought the families up that were there that had been heavily affected. They had lost, and I said, we want to pray for them. And I said, we're going to meet their needs. They've lost their home. And at that point, we had no real way to do that. I've told people, I've made a lot of promises that God was going to have to keep to people. I've made promises that God would have to keep the promise. We made a promise to them. And when I walked out of church, I got a text message from somebody who lives in Georgia that I knew. It was a friend of mine, but they're not a part of our church. They're not in Tennessee. They've never been to our church. They're just a friend of mine, a Christian school administrator, actually, and not Free Will Baptist. But he texted me and said, can I give online? And we had set up a web page that people could give monetarily. At that point, nobody had, but he gave a pretty significant financial gift on our online right then. And that was kind of the beginning of that. And then when we walked outside, there was a truck in our parking lot that had a trailer full of bottled water, probably 150 cases of bottled water. And he said, I'm looking for somewhere he said, he came from Sweetwater, Tennessee. He said, I've come from Sweetwater, Tennessee. I'm trying to look for somewhere to put this water. And he said, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, we got some guys here. Let's put it in our gym and we'll figure it out. And man, that was the beginning I never knew when we took that water. But by that night, by that Sunday evening, there was a tractor trailer from the Southern Baptist Convention of disaster relief supplies. And they said, we heard you're taking supplies. And I said, yeah, we're taking them and organizing them. Well, we became the designated drop-off for the county for disaster relief supplies. And so we So we would take in, process, sort, and distribute supplies, and that included tools, generators, food, non-perishable items, tarps. I mean, on and on and on and on. I think we processed over 200 generators, heaters, propane, gas, diesel, just on and on and on, just unbelievable. That we would get up in the morning sometimes and come in, and there would be 4 or 5 tractor trailers in our parking lot waiting to unload. We had 3 forklifts going there for a little while. And so we became a big hub for supplies and distribution. A lot of Free Will Baptist folks came in and helped us do that. And then in addition to that, we started to identify what are the needs of the people beyond these supplies. We figured out, if you bring a box of non-perishable foods and a bottle of water to someone who doesn't have a home, it doesn't mean a whole lot. And so we got connected with people who had lost their homes through some of the people in our church, and we started immediately trying to help them put their lives back together, find temporary housing, and then now we're really working on long-term solutions for them to get them back into a home. And we raised financial donations to do that, and people have come alongside us to help us to do what we couldn't do otherwise. And in a lot of different ways, the state of Tennessee Free Will Baptist has helped us by sponsoring us to hire we've hired a person, a temporary employee, to help us with manning the phone line and help us coordinate volunteers. I think we've coordinated about 600 volunteers in the last 6 weeks that have come from other places, and we put them on projects to help. And so, it's been incredible. I mean, I could talk forever, and I know your podcast listeners don't want to hear me talk forever, but this week we purchased 4 lots as a church. We purchased 4 lots. There's an organization called ASP in East Tennessee that rebuilds homes, but the first qualification is you got to own property. Well, all these people lost their property. They don't have property. And so we raised about $100,000 to purchase property for these homes. And we close on those on this coming Thursday. And then ASP, this organization, will start building their homes next week. And so they're going to move back into homes, no mortgage. They're going to own these homes and the property. And we have about, a bunch more families. We're trying to get to that point with them. And so it's been awesome to see God provide. And again, I've made promises that only God could keep, but He's kept them. Every single time He's provided and made a way, sometimes through very unique avenues that I would have never expected. And God's just blessed us to be able to help people, and God's used a lot of Free Will Baptist people to help us. We don't have the capacity to help these people on our own. I mean, no church would really. And but when we all come together, we can accomplish so much, and it's been really incredible to be a part of that.
Well, that's wonderful. And you think about that, Noah, the land was washed away, but it sounds like a lot of those people, this is a solution for them. They'll be able to have homes, and you all have done such a wonderful job helping them with that.
Yeah, it's been great. We've donated, or we've had donated to us, and then been able to donate multiple vehicles. I mean, last night, a single mom met us here at the church, and she lost she had paid off her vehicle 1 month before the flood. And when she paid it off, she switched her insurance to liability because it was cheaper. It was less expensive. And she lost her vehicle, and it had the car seat in the back. And so last night we met her here at the church and was able to give her a vehicle because someone had given to us. And there's still lots of those needs out there, lots and lots of needs like that. We're in the process of trying to help people as they move into their homes. They don't have anything. They don't have any furniture. They don't have any household goods. They don't have things that we take for granted, towels, washcloths, none of this. They have nothing. And so, we're in the process of thinking through that now too. So, but again, it's been incredible, and to anybody who would be listening we've not been able to personally thank everybody. It's just been so overwhelming, the response, but man, I'm just so thankful for everybody who has helped us and reached out to us and sent a text message and encouraged us through this. It's really been, it's a tragedy, but it's been a great thing to be a part of, to see how God's worked in and through that. We had a guy at church yesterday that was a flood victim. We've started helping him. He came last week and rededicated his life to the Lord. He was here yesterday at church, and and just weeping and just saying, one guy we helped made this statement, which has resonated with me. He said, I never have been a big believer in this divine intervention stuff. He said, I've always thought that was silly, divine intervention. He said, but you guys are starting to make a believer out of me. And I said, that's exactly why we're doing it. That's exactly
That's right. That's the point.
I said, that's the point, man. We don't have anything to gain in this. I said, we want you to, we're here in Jesus' name, and we want you to see him through us. And so that's been our desire as a church. And my prayer is that we can do that.
Well, I'll be honest, we're just proud of you. We're so thankful for how you've been the hands and feet of Christ and all these hurting people, and wanted to encourage our listeners. Let's talk to them a little bit. When they think about Erwin, maybe think about they've seen perhaps what you mentioned, the hospital where they're airlifting people off. Maybe think about what's happening in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina. What can they do going forward to help and support your community?
Well, a couple things I would say. One is just to remember us, our community. Of course, we're not the only community. Lots of communities in our where there's a high concentration of Free Will Baptists. Lots of these communities have been highly affected. Some of the Free Will Baptist churches have been affected, and so just remember us. It is the recovery is really just beginning. It's not ended. It's really just beginning, and the needs for supplies and stuff, is kind of dissipated. Those are smaller needs. Really, the needs now are much more significant. They're much larger needs, like housing and temporary housing, long-term housing, replacing the items that people lost, like vehicles and household items and things like that. And so, those are things that we're working on. We've had people ask about Christmas, for instance. What about Christmas? What are these people going to do for Christmas? And, what we're trying to do as a church is replace people's, as we're moving them back into homes, is get people to maybe come alongside them and maybe sponsor a living room suit or a bedroom suit or a particular maybe household items. We have a lot of this stuff on our website where people can look if they're interested in doing something like that. But just remembering us in prayer as we take a lot for granted. I've learned through this. Of course, where I live was fine and we didn't lose anything, but man, you just take so much for granted. Simple things like it's getting cold now. When you turn on the heat, we take that for granted. These people some of these people have lived in tents, for a period of time. And we take that for granted, going to the hallway and grabbing a towel for you to take a shower. I mean, we just take that stuff for granted. And so these people need that stuff. And a lot of the people that were heavily affected are they were sort of needy already. They sort of had needs before the flood. And so they really need God's people to come alongside them and help them. And so, there's all types of ways that people can help and get involved. And I would encourage them to get involved as a church, maybe to get involved in something like this around Christmas time, or as an individual, get involved. There's all kinds of needs that can be met, and people can play a real instrumental role in meeting those needs.
That's great. So, Noah, I guess the best way is kind of follow your website, Evergreen Church.
Yeah, so we have a specific link that goes right to everything hurricane related. So it's churchatevergreen.com/relief. On that page, there's a place for people to volunteer. So like I said, we've hosted a ton of volunteers from all backgrounds and all denominations. I mean, and so if they have a group that's interested in volunteering, coming and help rebuild a home or clean up or anything like that, they can fill out a form to do that. Also, there's on that page where people in our community can request assistance. But then there's we list every Monday, we update current needs. What do we feel like current needs are if people want to help with those needs? And so that list is there. There's also a link that if people want to give monetarily, they can do that there as well. So it's churchatevergreen.com/relief. There's actually a phone number on that page. I think it's 433-330-1776, which is a dedicated phone line that goes straight to a lady that we have helping us coordinate volunteer relief efforts. And so they can talk to her and she can help them with any questions that they have. And so, if they go there, man, there's lots of ways to get involved, and we would love for them to get involved.
So yes, we want you to continue to pray for East Tennessee and Western North Carolina, but here's a way this is a church that's very on the ground, doing a lot of things for a lot of families. So we encourage you to go to their website and look at what you can do. Every little bit counts, doesn't it, Noah? And so it really does make a difference.
No doubt.
Well, buddy, we appreciate you. We appreciate your church. And what you're doing there in East Tennessee. And as we do approach the holidays, we do not want to forget what these folks have gone through. And as you mentioned, it's a long-term process, especially people who lost loved ones and lost their jobs. This is something that will hurt for a long time, many of them until they see Jesus. So
Mm.
we appreciate what you're doing there, buddy.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to share about some of these needs, and thank you for everybody out there that's helped us. We can't express our appreciation enough.
And so we want to thank you, our listeners, too. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And maybe you know someone that would benefit from this podcast. We encourage you to take it, share it with them, do what you can. Please pray for these communities. Please also give to these communities. And remember, every little thing you do, it truly does matter. It truly does make a difference. We truly are better when we work together. We're better together. Thank you for being with us today.